All right, good morning and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we'll be talking about Flows protocol and how it can provide you with some additional monitoring coverage. We'll have a brief Q&A at the end if we have some time. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to send those questions within the questions window in the lower right. Also, if we do have some time left, we'll take a quick look at our NetFlow collector product and then kind of talk about what we can do going forward. My name is Kevin Jackson. I am the Technical Solutions Consultant from Health Systems by way of the Intermapper product, and I will be presenting to you today a little bit more about the solutions that we can provide from Health Systems. Just a little bit about Health Systems. Health Systems is a global leader in software, all things software, not just network operations, but we also perform well in business operations as well. So we kind of have created three tiers to our product, or three groups to our product, in terms of how we can essentially help our customers in their day-to-day operations. We have a ton of automation functionality built in, whether it's performance monitoring automation or workload automation products that we can provide to kind of offload some of those manual tasks and processes. We have the ability to manage data. If you have large data processes that you currently are taking care of, we can support that function as well. And then from the security side, obviously security is a paramount in terms of trying to ensure that your company is properly secured. We have a number of different security applications, from secure FTP to managing just overall security on your whether it's your cloud services or your on-prem solutions. We can support those endeavors as well. So we have a total solution built into our Health Systems portfolio. So our agenda today, we'll talk about bandwidth monitoring and the different aspects of bandwidth monitoring. We'll talk a little bit about our solution, Intermapper software, and what we can do and how we can support this bandwidth monitoring. And then we'll kind of give you an idea of how we can get started with the application to try to help you get a better understanding of how your bandwidth is being used. So let's talk about bandwidth monitoring 101. So there's two performance metrics that we kind of consider when we're talking about bandwidth monitoring. The first is bandwidth utilization. And bandwidth utilization monitoring is essentially utilization that we can show past and present traffic levels on a specific segment of a link. And it's usually based on some type of level. So whether it's a minimum or an average threshold or a maximum threshold, this is how we're able to capture that utilization and then present that information and better understand the utilization on your infrastructure. And then the second metrics is bandwidth usage, which refers to the rate of data transfer from a fixed period of time. So what we'll focus today on is from the bandwidth monitoring side is we're going to focus more on the usage side. So providing some parameters that are used to kind of determine bandwidth usage on your network. So in terms of bandwidth usage, what we're looking to do is we're looking to get that visibility, and typically flows is the way we're able to capture this network usage. So we're trying to figure out, who's using the bandwidth hogs, applications, etc., and they get a better understanding of where we need to improve or what we need to do going forward. So what does this bandwidth monitoring allows you to do? It allows you to identify IPs or hosts, to kind of give you a range in terms of percentage-wise, or even just an idea of the amount of bandwidth that host is using. And it allows you to kind of pinpoint those frequently visited sites. So if there's someone on your network that's primarily using or accessing the particular sites, that information can be captured as well. And it just analyzes, downloads and uploads, top talkers, things of that nature. So really good information there. So how does bandwidth monitoring help IT? First and foremost, one of the things that you want to kind of consider, if you don't have a security solution in place, maybe IDS or IPS, having some type of flows capable component or monitoring functionality can also help you and provide you with kind of a low tier security approach. It's not going to replace your security function, but it can give you some semblance of who is trying to hit particular your gateways or your routers. So it can show you some information about possible DDoS attacks and allow for you to do some quick response to kind of mitigate some of these attacks. If you understand uh, the thresholds that you have, you understand your environment, you can also use this software to kind of pinpoint some of those unusual traffic spikes. So if there's a spike in your traffic, and you know that this is something that your environment is not used to, you can kind of take a closer look and see if there's a potential issues. And then you can use characterize new increased bandwidth use. Again, inbound, outbound traffic. You can get a better understanding of where the norms are, where optimal functionality is, and then kind of if you need to throttle your bandwidth or you need to increase bandwidth, you can do that with that information. And then for forensic information, you can see some historical information. You can go back and see how, maybe do some trend analysis on how your environment has been behaving. But also for compliance purposes, you can kind of capture this information, and then if asked, you can be able to present this information if there's some type of security audit going on within your organization. And then this gives you an overall data regarding use of flows. Essentially allows you to just get an overall view of your bandwidth usage. And the one thing you want to kind of keep an eye on is where you need to place these exporters, these devices, and then how you can capture that information and present it back to you. So let's talk about the different types of flows. So what is flows? Essentially, flows is just how we are able to measure data traveling between devices. So it's how we can accurately determine traffic over a period of time. So there is a number of different flows protocol. NetFlow primarily created in the 90s by Cisco to be able to better collect that IP information and traffic as it kind of enters and hits those particular devices and their interfaces. But over the years, NetFlow has evolved from its original inception and become a more adopted model in the industry for bandwidth monitoring or bandwidth usage monitoring. So they started out with version 1 and 2, and then they jumped to version 5, and now most commonly they're using NetFlow version 9. So some of the other vendors saw this capability and wanted to kind of dip into that market as well. So they developed their own proprietary flows protocol, like S-Flows, which is created by a group of vendors in order to kind of capture similar reporting and data, but it's set up a little differently. Rather than report every packet across the interface, the S-Flow functionality captures samples. So NetFlow is kind of essentially allows you to capture a lot of data, pulls a lot of information from your devices. S-Flows just looks for kind of samples, so it's a less data set, but it also just gives you a good understanding of how that traffic, how the indication of bandwidth usage. Now, later, Cisco comes out with IPFix, which is kind of designated as NetFlow version 10, which is a more advanced version of flows that allows users to configure and add additional information to their standard fields. So typical flows have fixed templates with fixed amount of data. IPFix allows you to kind of expand that information that you're able to capture from these devices, create these additional groups of data so that you can collect. So this allows you more visibility into the type of information that you're able to capture. So again, the main protocols that you'll see is NetFlow, S-Flow. JFlow is primarily used for as a Juniper proprietary protocol, so that's what they use for their devices. And then IPFix supports more so the Cisco infrastructure. But these are the different types of flows components that you're able to see. This is the data and information that you're able to capture: source, destination, IP addresses, the type of service that is being sent or being utilized. and then the interfaces that the devices are using to kind of capture that information. So how does it work? So what we call a NetFlow exporter essentially is just a device that supports this type of protocol, this type of technology. And an exporter could be a router, it could be a switch, it could be a firewall, any device that can basically capture this type of traffic and present this traffic can be considered an exporter. So the first thing we need to do is identify whether the device supports this type of technology, and then figure out what type of what amount of information, or where the information we want to kind of capture and where we want to push it to. So you have your flows exporter, and then you need some type of software to be able to identify what this information is, right? So essentially what we do is the data is basically sent in this packet form, and we need to figure out what this packet form, this information is, and so we can extrapolate this information and present it back to you. So this is just an example of how you would set up a typical exporter, and from where the information is going to. So you have your network traffic information, you can have your remote offices if you have additional sites, and then you have your main office as well. And this device here, maybe it's a router, or it's a firewall, or maybe it's a layer 3 switch that does routing. The device sits strategically between these two environments here. Now we want to capture that traffic information from wherever it's coming from, and then we want to push it to some type of collector. So the software is sitting on the server and is collecting this data, and then it's able to kind of take that information and give you some feedback in terms of what that information is. So kind of very simplistic way of utilizing and very simplistic way of identifying where strategically where these quote unquote exporters need to live. So why Intermapper? So Intermapper has part of the architecture of the software is we have our network monitoring solution, which is the ability to monitor your network infrastructure, the ability to capture bandwidth, traffic, and utilization information, so you can kind of get a better understanding and put thresholds to your devices, so we can alert you and alarm you when those devices hit a particular threshold. And then we have an add-on to that product called our Intermapper Flows application, which is our NetFlow collector application. So what we're able to do is, use the main Intermapper software to monitor bandwidth utilization, and then use our flows component to monitor bandwidth usage. Okay, so we're able to capture this information. We're able to show you the top talkers. We're able to show you the top listeners. We can analyze the NetFlow data in real time and present you back feedback in terms of charting function. So you can kind of drill into the chart and see exactly, who's talking at that particular time. You can, show different kind of increments of in terms of time frame. If you need to go down to the second of when that traffic was being used, you can go down to the second. So again, this allows you to spot potential increase in bandwidth usage, see where the increase is happening, see who is using that particular bandwidth. And then this gives you some tangible information that you can utilize to make those necessary improvements, right? So you can use this information as a way to, if the traffic that you've just investigated is traffic that is work related and needs to be improved upon, then you can go back to the higher ups and say, hey, listen, this is information that we've gotten back from our product. This is saying that we don't have enough bandwidth to support business needs. So what we can do is we need to increase the bandwidth function so our employees are more efficient and have the tools that they require to be able to do their jobs. Or you can go back and say, we've been analyzing the data and looking at this usage, and realize that there's a lot of folks that's not necessarily doing work-related functions. They're doing a lot of downloading of things from different sites, or they have open connections to places that they're not supposed to. So what you can do is you can take this information and then throttle the bandwidth, or maybe add additional components built in to kind of secure and control what the customers or what the users are utilizing. So that's another way to kind of plan for that, those needs. And then you can also use it to troubleshoot. You can use it to kind of figure out if the traffic or the bandwidth that you're using is unusual based on your internal parameters. So once you've identified your baseline in terms of the traffic that your company or your organization use on a day-to-day basis, you can use this as a way to kind of compare the two. So if there's unusual spikes in usage, then you know that there's something going on, and then you know that you need to take a look at this, that kind of inference. And then we can kind of show some additional information in terms of the IPs that are connected to the highest number of hosts, so you can kind of capture that information and see who's really hogging up the bandwidth on your network. So what is Intermapper software? As I mentioned, Intermapper is a network monitoring solution. Primarily, what we do is we're able to provide feedback in terms of our visualization component, so we can go out there and do network discovery. We can create network topology maps from a layer 2 and a layer 3 standpoint. So we create these maps, these visuals, and then we're able to add performance and provide you with performance monitoring metrics within the maps themselves. We can also create charts and graphs, so it gives you a real-time kind of look at the information at a glance. So we have our charting and graphing functionality, which is outside of the flows component. Flows has its own interface and has its own kind of capabilities and functions. But the Intermapper software, the main monitoring software, has the charting and graphing functionality, where we can show you spikes and peaks or anomalies from a bandwidth utilization standpoint. So we're able to monitor the bandwidth utilization, the bandwidth traffic, using our main monitoring function, and then using the Intermapper flows component, we're able to monitor the actual usage. So an example would be if you're monitoring one of your routers and you're monitoring the interfaces, we can see and show you the traffic on each one of those interfaces in a percentage kind of in percentages, or just give you in bytes, in terms of bytes. We can give you how much data is being transmitted and how much data is being received. But what exactly is that data? What does that data mean? Then you can kind of use the Intermapper flows component to kind of give you a better understanding of what that data is. So this kind of how the two applications will work in conjunction with each other. And then we have, in terms of the flexibility in monitoring just about anything with an IP address, anything that has an IP address, whether it's a standard function or standard device within your organization, or even non-standard devices that sits within your space, i.e., HVAC, environmental sensors, IP cameras, door sensors, things of that nature, security systems. Intermapper does a really good job of identifying these devices and giving you the ability to add these devices on the map, so you can see everything holistically and everything at a glance. And then in terms of compatibility, our software is supported on pretty much any of the major operating systems. So Windows, Linux, Mac, we can run our applications on. And then we have the free 30-day trial, so you can, if you take a look at the product, you can install it, fully functional application. And one of the things to know with our application is, if you do install the free trial, if you run and create your maps, if you build out your mapping network and kind of configure the maps and the software to where you're seeing some data and capturing data even from the flows component side, to go from the free trial to a to go from the free trial to ready-made, and it's just a matter of changing the license. So there's no need to reinstall. There's no need to recreate to go from trial to production. It's just a matter of a license. So that makes what you've done prior, what you've done during the trial, something that you don't have to change once you go to a production environment. So these are some of an examples of some of the live maps that we are able to present. You can make the maps as simplistic as you want to based on your environment, or you can make the maps as detailed and complex as you want to. You can nest maps and do drill downs. So you can use background images, you can use icons built in to the product to create more accurate depiction of your network and the devices that you're working with as well. And then these are some of the charts and graphs. Again, these are essentially the information presented by our NetFlow component. You can see top talkers, top listeners, top application ports. And then our flexibility and monitoring comes from the probes that we have built into the product. The probes essentially is the backbone of what we do. It's what we use to essentially interrogate the devices and capture information that these devices support, and then present them within the mapping interface. So again, SNMP is what we support. We support ICMP as well, but we also are able to support every other protocol you can utilize. So whether it's TCP, HTTP, WMI, PowerShell. So we're very flexible in terms of the different types of protocols we can support. SNMP version 1, V2C version 3, so we support all those SNMP versions. And then we have the ability to create custom probes. So if we have close to 200 built-in probes within the product. If the built-ins is not enough for you to kind of monitor your devices, you can create your own custom probes based on the information that you want to monitor, based on the performance information that you're looking to do. So this is just a use case from one of our customers. So one of the problem was HR. They were concerned about the business units. They were wasting time using social media sites at work. So what the solution is to use Intermapper, and what they're able to do is capture this information, and then they were able to send HR regular reports based on the internet activity of these employees. So at least HR can monitor information, see who's kind of using social media sites and how often they're using those sites. So that's just a very basic use case where a product like Intermapper Flows can be able to help outside of the IT department, but also help the HR department determine and try to figure out where employees can be more kind of efficient, or where time is being wasted during work hours. So how do you get started? A few things to note and a few questions to ask when kind of investigating flows component is the first thing, most important thing is, does your equipment support flows? And typically you can get that information by doing a search, or you can contact the vendor directly, and the vendor should be able to identify and tell you whether your device support flows. One thing to note about this as well is depending on the model and the operating system that device supports, that can be the difference whether that device supports flows or not. So what they'll do is, maybe you don't have the latest OS or iOS image on your device, and that might be the difference between that device supporting flows technology or not. So you might need to update your device to the latest version of the iOS or operating system, so you can take advantage of the flows protocol. Then the next question to ask is, how many exporters do I need? And this depends on the size and scope of your network. This depends on how what kind of topology you have, and where these these devices are sitting. So you need to kind of figure out Do I want to have flows exported from each one of my, if I have multiple sites or remote offices and I have routers at each one of those sites, do I want flows to be, do I care about flows or usage at each one of these sites, or do I just care about my main site? Are all these routers coming back to my main router and then going out? So it really depends on how your network is laid out to determine how many exporters you need to be able to capture that information. And then how can I plan for flows traffic? Typically, planning for the flows depends on the number of exporters, obviously, and how much data you're going to be collecting. It's very difficult to be able to size based on that because you can have 20 exporters and not have a lot of data being collected. Or you can have one exporter and have millions and millions of flows being collected because you have a very active network. So we have to kind of take those into consideration, understand that there is a load based on performance and also based on storage requirements because the data is stored locally. So we have to kind of consider those factors as well. And then that kind of goes into the number 4, how do I plan for flows data storage? As I mentioned, it really depends on how much flows per hour you're generating. You can generate millions and millions of flows using one exporter or multiple exporters, or you can generate very little flows using multiple exporters. So once you kind of start capturing the information, you'll be able to get a good understanding of the size and scope of the data that you're able to capture. And then from there, you can determine, how many flows exporters you want to be able to utilize. And what you can do also is you can start with 1 or 2 and then ramp up, or you can stagger between the flows exporters. If you need to kind of, change from one, you don't want to do multiple exporters, but you want to be able to kind of stagger from one to another. You can get 2 license or 1 license for 2 devices, and then turn one off on one device and then turn one on the other device and kind of go back and forth. Now, the caveat with that is once you stop exporting traffic from a device or stop capturing the information from a device, there's going to be a gap in when you turn the exporter off, sending, to when you re-enable that exporter and collecting the data again. So there's going to be that gap where you will no longer be capturing the information between that time frame. So that's kind of what would happen if you were to stagger your flows component between one license. Okay. So how do we get started? As I mentioned, we have a free 30-day trial, fully functional software that has both the Intermapper main monitoring function as well as the Intermapper flows component. These are some of the things that you need to kind of keep in consideration, remove firewall restrictions. Then you can configure your exporters to send the data to Intermapper Flow Server, which will collect that information and then be able to provide that feedback. And then once configured, we'll be able to detect the data automatically. So 99% of the configurations is done on the device side, and the mapper will sit, listen, and collect the information, and then be able to present that information back to you. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can let us know questions, comments, feedback, concerns. We have a ton of resources online to be able to help you through the process. If you have Cisco devices that you want to configure flows for, or Juniper devices, there's sample configurations on the site. And then to be able to get to the Intermapper free trial, just go to the help system site and to start the free trial. If you have any questions, please, once again, reach out to us and let us know. And just really quickly, I just want to show you the interface of the software. So this is our Intermapper main monitoring software. So as you can see, we're able to monitor from just a visual standpoint. You can see the traffic flows on your devices. And as I mentioned before, we're able to monitor utilization traffic. So we're able to monitor the data being transmitted, data being received. You can see errors and discards. So the question is, I'm monitoring this particular device. What exactly is this 63% utilization traffic? So this is where the Intermapper flows component will come into play, where we're able to look at an interface and see exactly who's using 63% of the traffic on this particular interface. So our flows component has its own interface, and this is the interface. It's able to show you top talkers, top listeners, and you can see top applications. So we can kind of scroll through the applications, see what type of applications, protocols, ports, how much data, percentage of bandwidth. We can see the top sessions as well. We can see, okay, the client server connections, who's connected to what protocols that person is using, how much bandwidth, what ports, what protocols, etc. So this gives you a really good understanding of bandwidth usage and consumption. And then you can also see some historical information. So if you need to go back months or whenever you started collecting data, you can go back and pull that information. You can drill into the chart if you need to get more granular, to go down to the, maybe you want to go down to the second, see what kind of data was happening at that time. Or if you want to see specific interfaces, you can go on a specific interface and see who was talking on that particular interface. So if you have a device that's supporting multiple interfaces, capturing and pushing information to a collector, you can see exactly who's been talking on that particular interface as well. So that's just a little bit about the software. And then once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks again for joining.